I'd like to thank you all for your service. I know what a big time commitment this is for everyone to be involved in this process. One of the things I've talked about with many of you is kind of my background and what brought me to where I am now and what I think that'll bring to the courts. I grew up as an only child here in West Des Moines and gave you a lot of time alone for introspection, and I devoted myself to learning. That's kind of what I've always enjoyed, and it's carried me through school. By the time I got to high school, other kids might be messing around in study hall. I'd go to the Valley High School library and read every periodical they had every month, from psychology to sports cars, because I enjoyed getting new information, learning new things. It's something that brought me to law school, where I enjoyed the aspect of taking the law and applying it to problem solve, to reach the right answers. And it was that point that I decided that maybe I would find being a judge rewarding. Obviously, that's something for later in your life, but it is the time when I kind of thought that that might be a path I might want to pursue someday. Since that time, I mean, you can even ask my wife, anytime I pick up a new hobby or anything, it always preceded by a great deal of research to make sure I can do my best and know everything I can about the topic or something that I'm going to do, so I can always put my best work forward. Once I got out of law school, that continued in terms of my practice. I read the Rules of Civil Procedure front to back, not the most exciting read. Iowa Practice Series books to make sure I was familiar with the areas of the law I would be addressing, so I could help my clients get the results they could. I started out practicing in various areas of law. Civil law, everything that Petticord Wharton touches upon, so all kinds of civil matters, but my practice has gravitated mostly towards workers' compensation matters and appellate work more later in my career. Workers' compensation is an area where I don't believe any of the current appellate judges have a great deal of experience in their private practice, and is definitely an area that I can bring some additional skills to the court. Workers' compensation cases do present you with some transferable skills. The appellate process, obviously at the agency level, you get a complete fresh review, and I understand there are certain appellate cases where that is the case, and that frames how you have to present arguments, how you address issues, how you write, and you also deal with other cases where you would have a greater standard of deference on judicial review. So you get to apply those kind of skills and those kind of reviews of the cases and the materials in your writing. And so I think there are skills that can be transferred over to other areas of the law and just general appellate practice in dealing with that. Obviously, I understand the court's a very collegial place, and it's a place where you can draw upon the experience of everybody, and that is how I've tried to engage in my practice of the law, whether it's helping new attorneys learn how to do the things that lawyers do and try to educate them on how to be civil and collegial with your colleagues, whether that be opposing counsel or court staff or anybody you come into contact with. I do believe that it is important to do that because you can draw upon the wealth of experience around you, and there's always something to be learned from every interaction, not only to make you a better advocate and better at what you do, but it helps to understand the arguments, understand what other people are coming from, in addressing the issues that you're presented with. And I believe those are skills that I can take with me if I were to be appointed on the Court of Appeals, and things I could bring to the courts. But I'd obviously like to open it up to questions.
And we'll start with Commissioner Chase.
Thank you very much for your application. I do not have any questions for you today.
Commissioner Boyer.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer, for your application. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Marquardt.
Thank you for your application. I will ask you a question. Okay, so one of the things that it's going to be important for the person who's appointed to the Court of Appeals is for them to be able to hit the ground running. Talk to us about how you are prepared to be able to jump in and start writing those 100 opinions that you get that the eventual applicant will get to write a year.
Well, it is a bit faster paced in terms of the writing I do now, but kind of everything I've done in terms of how I've any activity is just involved in getting ready, researching everything I need to know. So obviously I would start off by trying to learn the nuts and bolts of the areas of the law that I might be called upon to address. Obviously those first few opinions might take a little longer, but I'm sure you'll pick up the law as you go, and there are other judges upon whose experience you can draw to help out in terms of maybe some things you might need a little extra assistance with. But I think I can do that in terms of the writing and getting ready and reviewing the materials. I applied to be on an associate district court judge in doing juvenile law. I hadn't really known a whole lot about juvenile law, but I picked up the code and started reading through the code to figure out kind of some of the nuts and bolts. And I think I can do that in terms of transferring into something like the Court of Appeals.
Commissioner DeFord,
Thank you for your application, Mr. Spencer. I have no questions at this time.
Commissioner Parrish,
I have no questions. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Graber,
No questions as well, thank you.
Commissioner Schnur.
Mr. Spencer, just to follow up on your answers to Commissioner Marquardt, I think you've indicated you're a workers' comp specialist, and I know you are. But the docket of the Court of Appeals is varied, as you know. A lot of family law, a lot of juvenile law, a lot of criminal law. Explain to us how you would get up to speed on those areas if you think you need to, and why, if somebody is concerned about that, why they shouldn't be concerned about those other areas of law if you spend most of your time on workers' compensation.
Sure, and I mean, in terms of getting ready, you can always talk to practitioners in the field. You can always find who's the preeminent people, and you can see what they have to tell you about what goes on, maybe get a flavor of what actually occurs in those areas of practice. There are obviously the treatises and practice series books to pick up and review if you need extra summation of kind of the body of the law. And then there's always kind of the baptism by fire, where you get in there and you actually have to start looking at the cases, reading the cases, and run the citations down the rabbit hole. It's kind of always something I always enjoyed about the law, and the ability, or the chance to learn those new areas of the law. So I think I would come into it with some degree of zeal to want to know those things, to learn those things, and to put that best work forward. And so I think that is something I could learn and try to pick up on, and draw on the experience of the other judges who may have experience in those areas of law. Obviously, I can bring a varied experience that they may draw upon when they're dealing with other matters, like workers' compensation matters. And so I think that could be beneficial in terms of that diversity of experience to help enhance the opinions that might come out of the court.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Hanson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How do you balance the need to process decisions quickly, should you be appointed to the Court of Appeals, but also in a thorough manner?
Well, I've always been good at time management. I try to make sure I keep up on all my work and keep it in advance. So I think time management is something I've worked hard to do in a busy civil practice. And I think that is something I can carry over with me into the Court of Appeals in terms of managing my time and making sure that I can keep up with the materials, reviewing the record that would be put in front of me. I do that somewhat with the appellate work I do now, although not quite at the pace that the Court of Appeals do in terms of the brief writing. But I think it might be a bit easier once you have fewer distractions and client phone calls and emails constantly demanding your attention to devote yourself to the work you're doing. And so I think I can keep up with that pace of work. And
Thank you.
Commissioner Roberts.
Yep. Chris, you've described the court as a collegial place. It's also a place where there are multiple people who are trying to make a decision together. For the risk that someone might disagree, can you talk about maybe in your practice and your experience about how you kind of manage that tension of being collegial while also expressing your viewpoints and potentially disagreeing with others at times?
sure, and I do that even among colleagues at work. I mean, obviously, two people might look at an area of the law, and there could be some divergence in terms of the interpretation or in terms of what you think the result is or should be. And I've had to argue that many times. I know I've sat with my father, who's also an attorney, and he and I may not always agree on some of the interpretation of the law. And we argue it out and hash it out, and maybe we don't end up agreeing on it, but you can express your opinions in a way without being disagreeable, without being disrespectful to people. And I think I carry that over too in terms of dealing with opposing counsel, in terms of what you do, how you express yourself. You can be firm in your opinions without being mean or being abrasive about it. And I feel that is something I've tried to do in my day-to-day practice.
Commissioner Henderson,
I have no questions, thank you.
Commissioner Semmelroth,
Is there a judicial role model or somebody that you've appeared in front of who would give us some insight into how you would perform as a judge?
Well, in terms of judges I've appeared in front of over the years, I always, at the agency level, I liked Claire Kramer. He was a deputy commissioner, always a very collegial gentleman, let the parties present their cases, and you always felt that he would review the facts, review the law, and let that dictate his decision and give you a fair and fair decision. His opinions, you could always see that he at least addressed and wrestled with the arguments that both parties were presenting in front of him. And so I feel that is something important because as an advocate, you have to explain to your client why things maybe did not go their way. And it always helps when it at least looks like the judge has addressed your issues and you can say, yes, but here's what happened. And that is something I believe is important and is kind of something I would take with me if I were to be a judge.
Commissioner Hartkoff,
I have no questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Spies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
To follow up on a question that Commissioner Roberts asked you, the Court of Appeals is very much a collaborative undertaking where 3 judges in a panel have to reach an accord, or if not, figure out where the split is. Being a new member of the court and to being addressing areas of the law with which you're not familiar, is there a fear that you would be sacrificing your independent judgment to judges who have more familiarity, say, with family law or juvenile law or criminal law? And how can you reassure us that's not going to be the case?
Well, I mean, obviously you can draw upon people's experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'll have to agree with what they're saying. You look at the law yourself, and if you might need a little extra guidance in terms of where to look, but it doesn't mean you're going to completely rely on them to issue the opinions. Just like I'm sure they wouldn't want to rely solely upon me on workers' compensation matters. They may have their own opinions about what the law is or what the law says. I think that is something that is important. You do draw upon people's experience, but you don't solely rely upon their experience. You do your own independent assessment and research, and maybe your review of the law takes you to someplace different. They may point out some areas where maybe your analysis is incomplete, or maybe you didn't think about a certain issue, and that might help inform your ultimate decision. Maybe you did not think about something. Some varied experience can be beneficial. You don't want to become a hammer so every problem becomes a nail. It helps you get out of that kind of thought process and maybe draw upon some other perspectives in terms of assessing the issues in front of you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hoig,
No questions, thank you.
Commissioner Stanger.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Spencer.
Good morning.
I have concerns that you don't have enough trial experience. I have concerns that you have no pro bono service experience. Can you please address my concerns on your qualifications for the court?
Well, I have not tried a jury trial. That is true. I've been involved in the case preparation of cases leading up to trial. I've tried cases that would be tried to a judge, whether they're administrative or in front of a magistrate judge. So I have done some trial work. And the practice in workers' compensation does apply some of the rules of civil procedure, even if it is a more relaxed version of the rules of evidence. So I have had some trial experience that I could bring with me to something like this. Obviously, not any jury trials, but in terms of the work of the appellate courts, I would be reviewing the records, and I've done that in some of my appellate capacity in terms of reviewing the records of trials of other people's trial work. In terms of my pro bono work, obviously I have not done as much in the way of pro bono work. We've donated to the causes of providing legal services to those who need it at the law firm I work at. I've tried to, in terms of other things I could do, I try to help young lawyers who maybe need a little guidance in terms of how to practice the law, maybe those other smaller aspects of your day-to-day service back to your community. But I think those are some other things that are also beneficial, and I've tried to do that some in my day-to-day life.
Thank you.
Commissioner Picklett.
I have no questions, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your application, and we wish you all the best.